should not think of resting while so many suffered around me, and now, as winter drew near, it was imperative everyone pulled their weight, especially me, who had the responsibility of ensuring the 3 greatest hunters of Nat were well rested and well fed. It was that obligation that drew me from bed. There was a chill in the air that made my flesh prickle. Still, I crossed to a table in the corner and poured icy water into a bowl and splashed my face. The cold shock roused me, and I dressed in warm layers before kneeling before the fireplace where embers glowed beneath white ash. I raked everything into a pile and reached for the bucket I kept near the fire that was supposed to be full of kindling, except it was empty. Strange. I knew I had gathered branches and bits of bark before dusk to keep from having to do it this morning. Anger twisted in my gut. One of my brothers must have taken it. "Ladies, do not get angry," I heard my mother say. "It is unbecoming." My teeth ached as I fought to quell what felt like violence in my veins and rationalised their behaviour. Perhaps one of them had grown too cold in the night, used all their kindling, which I had also refilled, and came for more. After all, if they did not sleep, they could not hunt, and if they did not hunt, we would not eat, and if we did not eat, we would all die. I sighed and tossed the rake aside. It clattered to the ground as I swiped the bucket from the floor and ventured into the semi-darkness. The cold felt like a fist pushing on my chest. It hurt to breathe, but it was a familiar feeling. As I stepped out onto the frozen ground, I thought I could smell snow coming. There was a sharpness to the cold, like knives poised against my skin. I made my way across the yard to the wood I kept piled near the barn. As I gathered juniper, pine, and a few large pieces of oak, a slim black cat hopped onto the heap, stretching and purring, eager for attention. "Good morning, Mouse," I said, scratching behind her ear. "Have you roused Rooster?" Rooster was a stallion, and older than Jackal, my eldest brother, who was 32. Mouse gave a high-pitched mewl. It was her way of saying no. "You had better wake him. The boys will be impatient to leave today. The snow is coming." Mouse's response was a growl. I knew why she protested. Rooster was tired, but it could not be helped. Even the old worked in Nat, human and animal alike. "I know he needs rest. If it were up to me, I would not send him into the forest at all." Rooster accompanied my brothers on their hunt, and since we only had one stallion, they took turns riding him. Rooster was not fond of the woods and moved slowly. My brothers took this as being disobedient and whipped him to keep him moving. I hated it, but when I had voiced my anger, Jackal threatened to whip me. Rooster, sweet Rooster, had stepped between us, and his defiance had angered Jackal, but the threat of a strike from the powerful stallion kept him at bay. "Strike me and I will put an arrow through your leg. I do not care if you are the only horse in all of Nat," Jackal had threatened through clenched teeth. Then he looked at me. "And you will pay for his disobedience. Do you spend all your evenings in the barn whining about how terrible we are? No wonder he defies us. Well, I will show you cruel, you ungrateful git." I spent the night in the barn after Jackal's threat, too afraid of what he might do in the night, but that had only delayed the inevitable. The next morning he woke me by dousing me in ice-cold water and threw a dull knife at my feet. "You will go to the moor and dig peat for our fires." Still soaked, I had ventured into the bog. My fingers were so frozen, I could hardly hold the knife. I would have never guessed that day, born in so much misery, would lead to an even worse day, the day I would eventually betray the fey man I loved. "You really are a silly git," I told myself. "You cannot love a man you have never really seen." But I knew by the way my chest ached, I had. Thankfully, I was roused from the pain by a sharp cry from Mouse, a familiar sound that usually signalled the approach of one of my brothers. My heart raced as I whirled to see which of the 3 were approaching, except no one was there. Still Mouse continued to hiss, showing her sharp teeth. The hair on her back stood on end. I studied the tree line just beyond the rotting wooden fence that lined our property. The trees there were like giants, ancient and menacing. Thick fog poured from the darkness between the trunks, snaking through the air toward me like beckoning